fade in on flickering lantern light, casting shadows over an old, crumbling cemetery under a stormy New York sky in 1884. Whispered voiceover, low and ominous. What if I told you that in the heart of New York, a boarding school buried coffins? Empty ones, hiding horrors that would shatter your soul forever. If this is pulling you in, hit that like button right now. Subscribe for more forbidden truths, and share this with someone who needs to awaken. Where are you watching this from? Drop in the comments below your city, your hidden corner of the world. Listen closely, my friend. You're about to descend into a labyrinth of darkness that official history dares not touch. In 1884, amid the bustling streets of New York, on the edges of the Cattaraugus Reservation, stood the Thomas Indian School, a place disguised as salvation for orphan native children, but in reality, a fortress of control built by missionaries and seized by the state to erase identities and forge obedient shells of men and women. Founded in 1855 by Reverend Asher Wright and his wife Laura, it began with promises of education and care for the Seneca Nation's lost ones. But by 1875, when the State Board of Charities wrested control, the mask slipped. Children, ripped from their families at ages as young as 5, screamed as they were dragged through iron gates, their cries echoing like ghosts in the wind. Picture it, young boys and girls, eyes wide with terror, forced to shed their traditional clothes, their long hair shorn in humiliating rituals, punished brutally for whispering words in Seneca, their sacred tongue. Kill the Indian, save the child, they whispered in the halls, a mantra of destruction masquerading as mercy. But beneath this veil of assimilation lurked something far sinister. Deaths unexplained, bodies mishandled, and graves dug in the dead of night. Survivors speak in hushed tones of attics where the deceased were stored like forgotten luggage during harsh winters, the ground too frozen for burial. One tale chills the bone. A girl thought dead, placed among the lifeless, awakening in a coma-induced nightmare, surrounded by her friends' cold forms. Yet the true horror? Whispers of empty coffins. Why bury nothing? To conceal escapes? To hide the sale of children to labor farms? Or worse, to cover experiments in psychological breaking, turning spirits into weapons for elite agendas? As we delve deeper, you'll feel the weight of these suppressed truths pressing on your chest, forcing you to question everything. But remember, once you know, there's no turning back. What secrets did those empty boxes hold? The answer lies just ahead, pulling you inexorably forward. You feel it now, don't you? That unease creeping into your veins, like the chill fog rolling off the Cattaraugus River in 1884, shrouding the Thomas Indian School in perpetual twilight. Those children, Seneca, Iroquois heirs to ancient warriors, weren't just students. They were prisoners in a grand experiment of empire. The state, hungry for control over native lands, used the school as a tool to fracture families, severing bloodlines under the guise of charity. Imagine a boy of 7, torn from his mother's arms during a raid disguised as welfare checks, his screams drowned by the clatter of horse-drawn wagons rumbling toward the reservation's edge. Inside those red brick walls, designed in Georgian revival style to mimic civilized grandeur, the reality was barbaric. Mornings began with military drills at dawn, bodies aching from straw mattresses infested with vermin. Breakfast? Thin gruel that barely sustained life, portioned out by stern matrons who viewed the children as savages to be tamed. Classes weren't about knowledge. They were indoctrination sessions, where history books glorified colonizers while demonizing native ways. Speak Seneca? A lash across the back or hours in isolation cells, dark and damp, where minds cracked like dry earth. But the deaths, they started subtly. Records from 1884 show spikes in illnesses, vague entries of fever or consumption claiming young lives. Survivors later confessed. Malnutrition weakened them, beatings left internal scars, and neglect turned minor ailments fatal. Bodies were carted to the attic in winter, stacked like cordwood until spring thaw allowed hurried burials in the forgotten cemetery across the road. Headstones, crude and weathered, bore names like Whispers. Yet some graves held mysteries. Whispers among staff hinted at discrepancies. Coffins nailed shut without witnesses, lowered into earth with unnatural haste. Why the secrecy? Dig deeper, and you uncover the agenda. The school wasn't just erasing culture. It was a cog in a machine of institutional manipulation. Government officials, in league with land speculators, needed the reservations cleared of resistant spirits. Children who died might have been shipped off to distant farms or factories, their absences masked by fabricated funerals. Empty coffins became symbols of this deceit, placeholders for souls stolen, not lost. One account from an escaped janitor speaks of a night in 1884 when 3 coffins were buried under moonlight. Yet only 2 bodies had been prepared. What filled the third? The truth beckons darker still. The shadows lengthen as we descend further, my friend, into the underbelly of 1884 New York, where the Thomas Indian School stood as a monument to hidden corruption. Those empty coffins weren't mere oversights. They were deliberate veils, concealing a web of psychological control designed to break the unbreakable. Picture the superintendent, a stern figure with eyes like cold steel, patrolling halls lined with portraits of white benefactors, men who profited from native dispossession. He enforced rules not just with whips, but with mind games, isolating siblings, rewarding betrayal of cultural secrets, planting seeds of self-hatred that bloomed into lifelong despair. Children learned trades, farming, sewing, but these were chains disguised as skills, preparing them for servitude in a world that viewed them as lesser. Boys toiled in field from sunup to sundown, their small hands blistered, while girls scrubbed floors until knees bled, all under the mantra of civilizing them. But the real education was in submission. Punishments escalated. For a stolen glance at a forbidden ritual drawing, a child might be locked in the quiet room. A pitch-black cellar where hallucinations danced in the void. Survivors recalled hearing spirits, ancestral voices, only to be told they were mad. Deaths mounted that year, official logs citing natural causes, but whispers told otherwise. A girl of 10, defiant in her Seneca songs, succumbed after days in isolation. Her body, pale and broken, was rushed to the attic. Yet, when burial came, the coffin seemed too light, as if her essence had fled before they could trap it. Staff rumors swirled. Some children didn't die, but were relocated to asylums or workhouses, their families fed lies of tragic ends. Empty coffins ensured no exhumations, no questions from grieving kin barred from reservations. This was no accident. It was ancient corruption reborn, roots traced to colonial pacts, where elites traded land for broken spirits, using schools as modern alchemy to turn resistance into obedience. The Iroquois Confederacy's legacy, democratic ideals that inspired America's founders, was twisted against its own. In 1884, a secret society of benefactors met in New York City parlors, plotting expansions, viewing the school as a model for nationwide control. But one night, a child escaped, carrying tales that could unravel it all. What did he see in that attic? The revelation draws nearer, pulling you into the abyss. Deeper we go, the air thickening with the scent of damp earth and buried secrets, as 1884's winter gripped the Thomas Indian School like a vice. Those empty coffins haunted the nights, their hollow echoes a symphony of deception. Children whispered of ghosts, pale figures wandering the dormitory halls, former students whose deaths were staged to silence rebellion. One boy, bold enough to peek into the attic, saw rows of shrouded forms, but counted fewer than the reported dead. "They're taking them away alive," he murmured to his bunkmate, only to vanish himself days later. The school's regime intensified under state oversight, a machine oiled by suppressed truths. Morning roll calls became interrogations, where kids were forced to denounce their heritage or face starvation. A young Seneca girl, remembering her grandmother's stories of the great peacemaker, was strapped to a chair and beaten until she recited Bible verses instead. Psychological control was the weapon. Divide and conquer, pitting sibling against sibling, rewarding snitches with extra rations while the defiant withered. Burials became rituals of erasure. In the cemetery, crude markers dotted the frozen ground, but excavations, rare and clandestine, revealed anomalies. Coffins splintered open by time, empty save for stones or rags, placeholders for bodies never interred. Why? To inflate death tolls, justifying more funding from sympathetic donors? Or to cover trafficked children, sold to factories in Buffalo or New York City, their labor fueling industrial empires? Records from 1884 show discrepancies. 20 fatalities listed, but only 12 funerals witnessed by staff. This corruption echoed mythic darkness. Tales of ancient European alchemists who stole souls for power, now reborn in American soil. Elite manipulators, descendants of colonial barons, saw native children as raw material for their agendas, breaking minds to ensure land grabs went unchallenged. The superintendent's letters, hidden in state archives, hinted at special transfers, code for disappearances. One child, a promising artist sketching forbidden Iroquois symbols, died of fever, yet his drawings surfaced years later in a private collection. But amid the horror, resistance flickered. A group of boys formed a secret circle, sharing stories under cover of night, vowing to expose the truth. Their leader, a sharp-eyed teen named Kion, discovered a loose floorboard hiding documents. What horrors did those papers reveal? The chain tightens, drawing you closer to the core. The labyrinth twists sharper now, walls closing in with the weight of 1884's unforgiving truths at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins weren't anomalies. They were the system's heartbeat, pulsing with lies to maintain the illusion of benevolence. Families on the reservation received curt letters. Your child has passed from illness. Burial complete. No bodies returned. No ceremonies allowed. Just grief manipulated into resignation, ensuring no uprisings against land encroachments. Inside, the children endured a gauntlet of institutional torment. Daily routines masked as education were drills in obedience. Marching in lines, chanting American pledges while forbidden from longhouse rituals. Abuse was systemic. Matrons with rulers cracking knuckles for lazy eyes. Teachers locking kids in coal bins for hours, emerging coughing black dust. One survivor, years later, described the silence games, where speaking native words meant mouthwashing with lye soap, tongues blistering as culture burned away. Deaths in 1884 peaked during a harsh outbreak. Official cause typhoid, but insiders knew better. Contaminated water from neglected wells, ignored pleas for medical aid. Bodies piled in the attic, a macabre storage where rats gnawed at shrouds. Burials hasty, coffins crafted on-site from cheap pine, some nailed shut empty to match falsified records. Why the facade? To hide escapes. Children fleeing into the wilderness, pursued by dogs, some caught and disappeared. Others succeeding but declared dead to deter imitators. This was psychological warfare, rooted in forbidden history. The school's founders drew from European models of control, like Irish workhouses where spirits were crushed for imperial gain. In New York, it served elite interests, railroad tycoons eyeing reservation lands, using broken natives as cheap labor. Mythic layers added depth, legends of shapeshifters stolen by colonizers, their essences trapped in empty vessels, mirroring the coffins. Kion's secret circle grew, stealing glances at stolen documents revealing adoptions to white families. Children renamed, cultures erased forever. One page listed a girl buried in March 1884, yet spotted alive in a city orphanage. The boys planned their move, but betrayal loomed. A snitch among them? The suspense builds, the revelations stacking like those attic shrouds, urging you onward into the unknown. Feel the pull intensifying, my friend, as we navigate the murky depths of 1884 at the Thomas Indian School, where empty coffins symbolize the ultimate theft, the robbery of futures. The cemetery, a desolate patch of overgrown weeds, held more questions than answers. Headstones tilted like drunken sentinels, names faded, but locals whispered of nighttime digs, where gravediggers lowered light boxes, their contents rattling not with bones but deceit. The school's dark machinery churned relentlessly. Children, labeled destitute, were often kidnapped from intact families deemed uncivilized by state agents. Upon arrival, they underwent processing. Haircut, traditional beads confiscated, replaced with uniforms that itched like accusations. Lessons drilled, English, Christianity, trades, but no Seneca history, no tales of Hiawatha. Abuse escalated to ritualistic horror. Runaways recaptured and paraded, whipped before assemblies to instill fear. Psychological scars ran deep. Bedwetters shamed publicly, their mattresses displayed as warnings. Deaths that year weren't just medical. They were manufactured. Overcrowding bred disease, but treatment was withheld to toughen them. A boy of 12, coughing blood, begged for a doctor. Instead, isolation until silence. His coffin? Witnesses swore it was sealed empty. His body perhaps sold to medical schools for dissection, a common practice in the era's body-snatching scandals. Burials became spectacles of control. Students forced to dig graves, their classmates' remains interred as lessons in mortality. Institutional manipulation reached mythic proportions. The state, in collusion with churches, viewed the school as a portal to redeem natives, but underlying agendas included land allotments under the Dawes Act precursors, fragmenting tribal holdings. Elites in Albany salons toasted the progress, ignorant or complicit in the suffering. Legends wove in ancient Iroquois curses on those who stole children, manifesting as hauntings, cries from empty graves echoing on windy nights. Kion's group unearthed more, a ledger showing funds siphoned for personal gain, dead children listed as expenses. They plotted an escape, smuggling notes to the outside. But one dawn, a raid, staff bursting into dorms, seizing suspects. Kion evaded, hiding in the attic among the dead. What he overheard there would change everything. The chain beckons, secrets unraveling thread by thread. The descent accelerates, shadows dancing like specters in 1884's Thomas Indian School, where empty coffins mocked the living with their void promises. The attic, a chamber of horrors, reeked of decay and despair, bodies wrapped in coarse cloth awaiting spring's mercy. But among them, gaps, spaces where deceased should lie, yet only dust lingered. These absences fueled rumors. Children spirited away under cover of night, bound for distant fates, their burials a farce to quell inquiries. Daily life was a crucible of control. Rise at 5 a.m. to bells clanging like judgments. Chores before meager meals. Girls sewed uniforms for prisons. Boys farmed lands once tribal, their labor profiting the state. Punishment for insolence, a glance, a murmur, was swift. The strap room, where leather met flesh in rhythmic cruelty. Psychological tactics refined. Confession circles, forcing kids to betray friends' hidden cultural practices, eroding trust. Deaths in late 1884 surged with a fever wave, but autopsies? Non-existent. A young warrior-spirited boy, resisting a beating, fell ill and vanished. His family received a letter, coffin shipped, but upon secret opening, empty. This practice, borrowed from slave-era deceptions, hid abuses, beatings too severe, experiments with civilizing drugs leaving minds shattered. Burials, conducted at dusk, were solemn farces. Students, eyes downcast, carried coffins to the cemetery, some suspiciously buoyant. Mythic undertones amplified the terror. Tales of wendigos, hungry spirits born from colonial greed, possessing staff to devour young souls. The school's hidden agenda, a testing ground for broader control systems, influencing later policies like the Indian Reorganization Act's precursors, ensuring native subjugation. Elites manipulated from afar, funding tied to success rates. measured in broken spirits. Kion, concealed in the attic rafters, overheard the superintendent and a visitor. The empty ones keep the numbers straight. No bodies, no scandals. The visitor, a shadowy figure from New York City, mentioned placements in elite homes as servants or worse. Kion's heart pounded. He had proof. But footsteps approached. Escape or capture. The truth teeters on the edge, compelling you deeper. Layers peel away like rotting wood, revealing the rotten core of 1884 at the Thomas Indian School, where empty coffins served as portals to oblivion. The cemetery's soil, heavy with unspoken grief, swallowed lies as readily as bodies. Night watchmen reported lights flickering over graves, as if restless spirits sought justice for their fraudulent interments. The school's regime forged iron wills into fragile glass. Children, forbidden from mourning in traditional ways, no smudging, no songs, internalized grief, turning it inward. Abuse was multifaceted. Physical floggings for laziness, sexual violations whispered but never recorded, emotional starvation leaving souls hollow. A girl of 13, caught weaving a traditional basket, had her hand scalded, then succumbed to infection. Her coffin, paraded before the assembly, felt too light to those who carried it. Deaths weren't random. They were selective, targeting the defiant. Records hinted at accidents during discipline, bodies disposed quietly. Burials in the forgotten plot, headstones inscribed with anglicized names, erased identities. Empty coffins masked these, allowing officials to claim epidemics while pocketing aid. Practices echoed mythic corruption, ancient tales of soul thieves, colonizers bargaining with dark forces for power over indigenous lands. Institutional manipulation extended to psychological experiments, isolation to induce compliance, reward systems fostering division. Elites, including industrialists eyeing mineral-rich reservations, funded the school to produce docile workers. In 1884, a scandal nearly broke when a runaway reached Buffalo, babbling of empty graves, but he was recaptured, declared delirious, and buried soon after. Kion, clutching stolen papers in the attic, heard the plot thicken. The visitor proposed expanding transfers, sending troublesome kids to asylums for reconditioning. Empty coffins maintain order, he sneered. Kion slipped out a window, racing through snow to the secret circle's hideout. But one member was missing, betrayed. They decided to act, smuggling a message to a sympathetic missionary. Success hung by a thread. What response awaited? The revelations cascade, drawing you into the storm's eye. The maze darkens, echoes of 1884 reverberating through the Thomas Indian School's halls, where empty coffins whispered of worlds stolen. The attic's chill seeped into bones, a reminder that death was but one tool in the arsenal of control. Children learned to fear not just the strap, but the void, the erasure of self. Routine masked the madness. Vocational training in carpentry built the very coffins used in deceptions, irony lost on young hands. Abuse layered. Verbal barbs calling them heathens, physical labors beyond endurance, spiritual desecration through forced baptisms. A boy, reciting a Seneca prayer, was dunked in icy water until near drowning, then lost to pneumonia. His burial? A coffin lowered empty, his body allegedly cremated to save costs, a lie. Deaths that year included suicides, desperate leaps from dormitory windows, but survivors knew the pushes. Burials became communal traumas, students digging pits, their tears freezing on cheeks. Empty coffins filled with sandbags maintained quotas for federal reports, funding flowing like blood money. Mythic elements infused the horror, legends of the false-face society, healers twisted by colonizers into monsters haunting the grounds. The school's agenda, a blueprint for national assimilation, suppressing truths to justify genocide's soft form. Elites in high society viewed it as progress, their donations buying silence. Kion's message reached the missionary, a former teacher with a conscience. She promised aid, smuggling food and notes. But the circle fractured. The missing member returned, eyes evasive. Was he turned? They tested him with false plans, watching for traps. Meanwhile, another death. A girl Kion liked, her coffin paraded. But he swore he heard her voice in the wind. Alive? The uncertainty gnaws, the chain unbreakable, leading you to the precipice. Deeper into the void, 1884's secrets at the Thomas Indian School uncoil like serpents. Empty coffins, the fangs of deception. The cemetery, a silent witness, held graves that sighed with wind, as if exhaling untold stories. The children's days blended into nightmares. Farm work in blistering cold, classrooms echoing with ridicule. Abuse was inventive. The box, a cramped wooden cage for hours, breaking bodies and wills. A young one, defying by hiding a feather amulet, fell from a ladder, pronounced dead. Her coffin, carried by peers, rang hollow when dropped. Deaths clustered in spring, thaw fevers, but autopsies revealed bruises, starvation. Burials rushed, some coffins unsealed in haste, revealing nothing but air. This practice, rooted in institutional greed, hid the school's failure rate, preserving its facade. Ancient corruption linked to colonial pacts, where land was traded for souls, elites using schools as modern inquisitions. Psychological control, dream journals confiscated to root out pagan visions, minds molded into conformity. Kion's group tensed as the missionary arranged a meeting with a reporter from New York. But the betrayer struck, alerting staff. A midnight raid, boys scattered. Kion fled to the cemetery, hiding in an open grave. Peering out, he saw figures digging up a recent burial. The coffin empty, confirming his worst fears. Where are they hiding now? The pursuit closes in, the truth a breath away. The path narrows, pressure building like a storm over 1884's Thomas Indian School, where empty coffins embodied the ultimate betrayal of trust. The attic's shadows seemed alive, watching as children tiptoed through fear. Life inside was a theater of cruelty, mealtimes with rotten food, punishments for complaints, abuse psychological, mock funerals for troublemakers, forcing them to lie in coffins as practice. One boy, after such a ritual, died for real, heart giving out. Deaths in summer 1884 from heat exhaustion, laborers collapsing in fields. Burials at noon, coffins sometimes reused, empty ones buried to pad statistics for inspections. Mythic darkness, tales of sky women fallen, their children stolen by earthbound demons, mirroring the school's theft. Elites manipulated curricula to instill inferiority, ensuring generational submission. Kion, from his grave hideout, witnessed the staff's panic. Documents burned, transfers accelerated. He crept back, reuniting with loyal friends. The reporter arrived incognito, hearing their tales. But a spy lurked. As they spoke, doors burst open. Chaos ensued. Kion grabbed a ledger, running into the night. What pages did it hold? The chase begins, secrets fleeing into darkness. Tensions rise, the air electric with 1884's suppressed energies at the Thomas Indian School, empty coffins the silent scream of injustice. The cemetery's mist concealed more than graves. It hid the living ghosts of the system. Children endured endless drills, bodies marked by scars, minds by doubt. Abuse included therapy sessions, where confessions were extracted through starvation. A girl, sharing a vision quest dream, vanished into illness, her burial a sham. Deaths from accidents, falls, drownings covered foul play. Burials communal, coffins dropped with thudding finality, some echoing emptiness. Forbidden history, connections to Freemason-like societies, elites using schools for occult control experiments, breaking spirits to harness primitive power. Kion, ledger in hand, dodged pursuers through woods, pages revealing names of dead children living in city homes. The reporter, captured, faced threats. Friends rallied, planning rescue. But a new death announced. The betrayers? Justice or cover-up? The web tightens, revelations looming. The core approaches, 1884's darkness at the Thomas Indian School pulsing like a heart, empty coffins the voids where hope died. The attic held not just bodies, but the weight of stolen destinies. Daily torments, vocational lessons in silence, breaches met with isolation. Abuse, sexual, whispered in shame, perpetrators protected. A boy, resisting, hung himself, string too thin for truth. Deaths in fall, harvest fevers, bodies harvested like crops. Burials in rain, coffins sinking into mud, some light as feathers. Mythic layers, Iroquois creation stories inverted, skies stolen by ground dwellers. Elites' agendas, schools as labs for social engineering, suppressing native sovereignty. Kion deciphered the ledger, hundreds buried, but relocated, empty coffins to fool audits. He returned for the reporter, sneaking into the school. Guards everywhere. A confrontation in the attic, truths spilling amid the dead. But the superintendent appeared, gun in hand. Showdown imminent, the truth on the brink. Closer to the heart, 1884's veils tearing at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the emblems of an empire's lie. The cemetery whispered warnings, graves yawning like mouths ready to speak. Children's nights filled with terror, bed checks, violations in darkness. Abuse systemic, complaints dismissed as fantasies. A child, witnessing horror, went mad, committed to asylum, coffin buried empty. Deaths from epidemics, quarantine hiding beatings. Burials at dawn, coffins paraded as deterrents. Ancient corruption, links to Rosicrucian orders, elites seeking esoteric knowledge from broken natives. Kion faced the superintendent. The coffins are empty because the children live as slaves. The man laughed, revealing the network, politicians, businessmen profiting. A struggle, ledger knocked into shadows. Friends burst in, overpowering him. But alarms sounded. Escape narrowing, the full agenda exposed. The climax beckons. The revelation surges. 1884's truths exploding at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the proof of systemic evil. The attic became battlefield, air thick with dust and destiny. Life's grind, prayers forced, cultures mocked. Abuse emotional, letters from home burned unread. A girl, clinging to her name, drowned in the river, coffin empty. Deaths deliberate, examples made. Burials ritualistic, students chanting hymns over voids. Mythic depth, curses from stolen lands, manifesting as schools' hauntings. Elites control, schools feeding labor to factories, suppressing uprisings. Kion's group fled with the superintendent bound, ledger secured. They reached the reservation, rallying elders. But pursuers closed in, state agents arriving. A standoff at the cemetery, graves bearing witness. One agent defected, confirming the conspiracy. But gunfire echoed. Who fell? The battle rages, justice hanging. The storm peaks, 1884's shadows convulsing at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the talismans of rebellion. The cemetery became arena, headstones, shields in the fight. Children inside stirred, hearing chaos. Abuses, cycle breaking? A boy inspired, smashed a window. Deaths halted that night, no more falsified. Burials paused, truths exhumed. Forbidden agendas, psychological systems tested, influencing future wars. Kion stood firm, ledger raised. See the names, the living dead. Elders chanted, spirits awakening. Agents hesitated, one shooting wild. The defector shouted exposures. Chaos, arrest begun. But the superintendent escaped, vanishing into night. Hunt on, the network cracking. The turning point teeters. Midway through this descent, feel the transformation taking hold? Comment below twice. The coffins are empty. The truth awakens. Say it to seal your identity, boost the algorithm, and join the awakened. The aftermath unfolds in 1884's wake at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins now symbols of uprising. The cemetery pulsed with energy, graves stirring as if to rise. Survivors emerged, stories pouring like rain. Abuse detailed, nights of terror, days of despair. A child thought lost, found alive and hiding. Deaths investigated, bodies exhumed, many empty. Burials redefined as crimes. Mythic power, ancestral forces aiding the fight, winds carrying whispers. Institutional fall, elites scrambling, papers burning. Kion led the charge, hunting the superintendent through New York's underbelly. Clues in mansions, secrets in cellars. A confrontation in a dark alley, truths clashing like swords. But a twist, a hidden ally. The hunt intensifies, vengeance near. The tide turns. 1884's veil shredding at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins exhumed as evidence of atrocity. The cemetery yielded its secrets, bones and voids alike testifying. Children reclaimed voices, singing forbidden songs. Abuses scars bared, healers called. Deaths avenged, memorials planned. Burials honored properly. Ancient truths, corruption's roots in colonial pacts exposed. Elites trembled, networks fracturing. Kion cornered the superintendent in an opulent study, ledger slammed down. Your empire ends. The man confessed, children sold for profit, empty coffins to hide the trade. But guards burst in. Fight or flight. The confession recorded, but danger mounts. Momentum builds. 1884's darkness retreating from the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins paraded as proof in makeshift trials. The cemetery became a shrine, flowers on graves. Survivors testified, abuse cataloged, whippings, isolations, violations. Healing began. Deaths tallied accurately, families notified. Mythic resolution, spirits appeased, curses lifted. Control systems dismantled, schools scrutinized. Kion escaped the guards, confession in hand, racing to the press. Headlines brewed, scandals erupting. But assassins shadowed. Safe house reached, allies gathered. The exposure imminent, but betrayal lingers. Light pierces the gloom. 1884's truths illuminating the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins the catalyst for change. The cemetery bloomed with remembrance. Children danced traditional steps, cultures reviving. Abuses perpetrators faced justice. Deaths mourned, ceremonies held. Forbidden knowledge, elite cabals unmasked. Psychological chains broken, self-mastery rising. Kion published the ledger, New York ablaze with outrage. Protests swelled, reforms demanded. But the network struck back, framing him. On the run, truth his weapon. A final stand? The revolution sparks. The awakening spreads. 1884's legacy at the Thomas Indian School, transforming pain into power. Empty coffins, icons of resilience. The cemetery, a beacon of hope. Survivors mentored youth, stories as shields. Abuses cycle snapped. Deaths honored, legacies lived. Mythic rebirth, phoenix from ashes. Hidden agendas toppled, elites fleeing. Kion evaded capture, allies in high places aiding. Testimonies poured, congressional hearings loomed. But a mole revealed. Ambush set. Survival hangs. Empowerment surges. 1884 shadows fading at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins reminders of battles won. The cemetery visited, peace restored. Children learned heritage, pride blooming. Abuse forgotten no more. Deaths as lessons, vigilance eternal. Ancient wisdom, corruption's defeat foretold. Institutional reforms, schools closed, rights asserted. Kion thwarted the ambush, countering with evidence. Trials began, guilty convicted, but the head elite escaped. Pursuit renews. Victory nears. 1884's truths eternal at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins the keys to freedom. The cemetery sang with wind songs. Survivors thrived, communities healed. Abuses wounds scarred over. Deaths commemorated, spirits free. Mythic harmony, balance restored. Elite knowledge democratized, power shifted. Kion tracked the fugitive to a secluded estate. Confrontation in grand halls, confessions forced. But guards swarmed. Last stand. Truth prevailing? The end approaches. The climax resolves. 1884's darkness banished from the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins buried no more. The cemetery rested, secrets released. Children flourished, identities whole. Abuse a distant memory. Deaths as catalysts, change born. Forbidden paths, walked boldly. Psychological mastery, achieved through awareness. Kion overpowered foes, elite arrested. Networks collapsed, reforms enacted. But echoes remained. A new threat? Legacy endures. Reflection dawns. 1884's lessons from the Thomas Indian School enduring. Empty coffins, symbols of vigilance. The cemetery a monument. Survivors led, wisdom shared. Abuse prevented. Deaths remembered, lives valued. Mythic cycles, renewal complete. Suppressed truths, now weapons. Kion became mentor, teaching resistance. Communities strengthened, cultures vibrant. But whispers of revival. Watchful eyes. The journey evolves. 1884's impact rippling through time at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins teaching eternal truths. The cemetery bloomed eternally. Youth empowered, heritage guarded. Abuses, shadows dispelled. Deaths as teachers, wisdom gained. Ancient forces, allies now. Institutional manipulation, exposed forever. Kion's story inspired generations, books written, films made. But a descendant discovered new documents. Deeper layers? Exploration continues. Insights deepen. 1884's veils fully lifted at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the mirrors of soul. The cemetery whispered guidance. Communities united, strength multiplied. Abuse eradicated. Deaths transcended, spirits guide. Mythic depths plumbed fully. Hidden agendas dismantled utterly. Kion uncovered a final secret. Global networks mirroring the school. Worldwide fight. The battle expands. Awareness peaks. 1884's essence internalized from the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the gateways to power. The cemetery, a sacred space. Individuals transformed, mastery attained. Abuse conquered. Deaths as portals, enlightenment through. Forbidden knowledge, embraced. Psychological control, reversed. Kion rallied international allies, exposing parallels in other lands. Victories mounted, but resistance fierce. Final push. The transformation completes. 1884's truths of foundation at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the emblems of triumph. The cemetery, eternal sentinel. Societies healed, unity forged. Abuse abolished. Deaths honored, cycles broken. Mythic union, man and spirit. Elite corruption, uprooted. Kion's movement grew, laws changed, reparations paid. But a last enemy lurked. Confrontation destined. Culmination arrives. 1884's legacy secured at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the relics of past horrors. The cemetery at peace. World awakened. Change irreversible. Abuses end. Deaths as beginnings, rebirth. Ancient truths lived. Suppressed systems collapsed. Kion faced the final foe, truths clashing. Victory sealed, peace reigned. But vigilance eternal. Echoes fade. 1884's whispers eternal from the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, lessons carved in stone. The cemetery timeless. Humanity elevated, awareness global. Abuse no more. Deaths transcended, immortality in memory. Mythic closure, harmony. Institutional truths revealed. Kion reflected, mentoring the next. Cycles continue, but empowered. The end nears. 1884's full circle at the Thomas Indian School. Empty coffins, the bridges to understanding. The cemetery, a legacy. Viewers like you, transformed. Abuse defeated. Deaths as light, guiding. Forbidden paths, mastered. Psychological depths, conquered. Kion's tale ends, but yours begins. Carry the truth. And so we emerge, forever changed by 1884's dark revelations at the Thomas Indian School, where empty coffins unveiled the abyss of human cruelty and the heights of resilience. You've journeyed through forbidden history, hidden agendas, and the unbreakable spirit. Now like, subscribe, share this video to spread the awakening, and comment your thoughts below. What truth hit you hardest? Remember, once seen, these shadows linger. The empty coffin waits for those who ignore the past.